At 24, my parents banned me from dating until I turned 28 after my sister's abusive ex. Today, I married in secret, and the truth will shock them. Following what happened to my sister, Olivia, my parents imposed precisely one rule. No dating, partnerships, or romantic entanglement until I was 28, otherwise they would cut off all financial assistance and leave me on my own. They did not adopt this regulation because they were controlling or pious. They made it because they had witnessed Olivia's lover, Luke, slowly ruin her over 4 years, isolating her from friends, convinced her she was useless, and eventually sending her in the hospital with a shattered skull when she attempted to flee. She was 24 when it began, which is the same age I am now. My parents were unable to safeguard Olivia because they failed to see the warning signals until it was too late. So they chose to safeguard me by removing the chance totally. There was no dating, thus there was no risk of making the incorrect choice. Simple math in their wounded minds. The difficulty was that I had previously met Noah 7 months before the regulation was enforced. We were organic chemistry lab mates, and he had a manner of explaining complicated chemicals that reminded me of novels about little people embarking on adventures. He made me giggle throughout the most difficult semester of my pre-medical studies. And in between bonding over botched titrations and celebrating our first successful synthesis, I fell madly in love with him. Noah and I had been covertly dating for 3 months when my parents revealed the new rule 4 weeks after Olivia was released from the hospital. I went home that night and grieved in his apartment, sure that we'd have to end our relationship since I couldn't afford medical school without my parents' aid. Noah embraced me and told me that we'd work it out together, that 4 years wasn't forever, and that he'd wait as long as necessary. We grew skilled at concealing in plain sight. Noah was my study companion, tutoring buddy, and friend who happened to live near college, allowing me to remain late at the library without troubling my parents. We studied at coffee shops, sitting across from one another with textbooks open and holding hands under the table where no one could see. We spent anniversaries at his apartment with takeout and calm music, and I always made sure to leave early enough to continue my story. My roommate Maya knew the truth and continually covered for me, giving my parents updates on our girls' nights while I was cuddled up on Noah's sofa watching medical dramas and dissecting their awful representations of hospital procedures. For 3 years we maintained a delicate balance between hidden connection and public friendship, and it worked because my parents were so concerned on Olivia's rehabilitation that they didn't pay too much attention to my life. Olivia knew, however. She found it out about 10 months in when she came to see me at school and noticed how Noah and I stared at each other in the campus center. She grabbed me aside later and asked directly whether we were together, and I couldn't lie to her. I expected her to be upset or inform our parents, but instead she hugged me and said she was delighted I met someone who could make me smile like that. She made me swear to be cautious and to listen if anyone told me they spotted red flags, since she hadn't and it nearly killed her. I promised, and she became our secret keeper. The sole family member who knew the truth. She'd cover for me when I needed an alibis and send text warnings if our parents inquired too much about my social life. She stated that observing Noah and me gave her faith that good love might exist. Not every romance ended with shattered bones and restraining orders. Everything changed 7 months ago when Noah proposed. We were going up to a waterfall that he had promised to show me for months, and as we got to the top, he dropped down on one knee, holding a ring he'd been saving for since our first anniversary. He stated he understood we couldn't tell anybody and couldn't be married until my parents' artificial deadline passed. But he wanted me to know that he was prepared to wait as long as it needed. I said yes, while weeping so hard that I couldn't see the ring. He picked a modest silver band with a little sapphire since he knew I'd need something to hide. I wore it on a chain beneath my shirt, where my folks would never see it. And we began to refer to each other as fiancés in private, despite the fact that we maintained the study buddy fiction openly. We promised ourselves we'd make it official when I was 28 in 4 years, do a modest ceremony, and then stop hiding. Then Olivia became ill. She developed persistent headaches. After weeks of doctor visits and tests, they discovered a golf ball-sized brain tumor pushing against her frontal lobe. The neurosurgeon stated that it was most likely benign but needed to be removed as soon as possible to avoid irreversible harm. My parents were terribly devastated because the procedure was set for 9 weeks away. They had just regained Olivia after losing her to Luke's influence, and now they risk losing her forever to something growing within her head. I spent every evening in the hospital with them for Olivia's pre-surgery visits, and one night, after a particularly difficult meeting, Olivia brought me into the hallway alone. She informed me that she had amended her will, just in case. One of her desires was that if something happened to her during surgery, she wanted me to quit hiding and start living my life. She wanted me to marry Noah and be happy rather than waiting for some artificial limit that our devastated parents had set. I informed her that nothing was going to happen. The surgeon had estimated the success rate was around 95%, but she grasped my hand tightly and made me promise nevertheless. She said she had spent 4 years of her life locked with someone who made her unhappy, and she was not going to let me spend another 3 years hiding someone who made me happy. I promised, even though the thought of her not being okay made me sick. The procedure was set for a Monday morning in November, with a 7-hour recuperation period before we could see her. My parents took time off work and practically relocated inside the hospital's waiting room. Noah joined me and sat in the corner, pretending to study but actually providing comfort. When the surgeon finally emerged after 7 hours instead of 6, we all sprang up so quickly that we nearly knocked over chairs. He said the tumor was more intricate than the scans revealed, wrapping around blood arteries in ways that made removal difficult. But they'd gotten everything, and Olivia was stable. She awoke disoriented and nauseated, but she did wake up. Over the next 2 weeks, she healed quicker than predicted, roaming the hallways and moaning about hospital food by day 4. The diagnosis came out benign, as hoped, and the surgeon stated she wouldn't require radiation or chemotherapy, only monitoring to ensure nothing grew back. My parents sobbed in relief, perhaps thanking every deity they'd ever heard of. Olivia requested a private conversation with me the night before her release. I assumed she wanted to talk about post-surgical care, or anything practical, but instead she asked whether I recalled my pledge. I answered, of course. But she was okay now, so there was no need to rush things. She shook her head, stating that going through this had taught her that life was too brief and unpredictable to waste time waiting for ideal conditions. She advised me to marry Noah immediately, not in 4 years, and she would help me figure out how to tell our parents later. I went home that night and told Noah what Olivia had said, and we talked until 3 a.m. about whether we were bold enough to do it. We'd been playing things safe for so long that the prospect of actually opposing my parents seemed horrifying and wrong. But we couldn't deny that Olivia was correct. We'd already wasted 3 years concealing, and 4 more years felt like an eternity when we were already certain of each other. Noah offered to marry me if I was ready to risk my parents' response. I suggested, let's do it next month instead, give us time to plan something small and figure out how to break the news. We settled on a courtroom ceremony with only a few close friends, nothing flashy, simply legal, real and ours. We chose a date of January 16th, exactly 9 weeks away, and began making modest preparations that my parents would never notice. During my winter vacation, Maya assisted me in shopping for a dress. Something basic and cream-colored that I could wear again so it wouldn't look strange sitting in my closet. Noah's best buddy, Ben, consented to be our witness, and Olivia promised to show up even if it meant skipping a follow-up visit. We didn't send out invites or reserve a location since we didn't want my parents to learn anything. We just required the marriage license, 2 witnesses, and an officiant to complete a 5-minute ceremony at the courthouse downtown. It seemed like the most significant decision of my life while yet being too simple to be true. My roommate asked whether I was worried about my parents cutting me off financially, and I was horrified. Medical school was expensive, and I had already taken out loans to cover some of my tuition. Losing their assistance would result in further debt and maybe having to take time off to work, delaying my graduation. Noah, on the other hand, had already graduated from engineering school and was working at a computer business downtown. He'd been accumulating money particularly for the potential of us having to support ourselves if my parents responded negatively. He showed me his bank account one night to prove he was serious, that we could truly make it through this. He had planned our budget expecting that I would lose all parental assistance. And, while it would be tight and we'd have to be cautious, it was manageable. I sobbed when I saw those spreadsheets because they represented 3 years of him preparing for our future at a time when most people our age were still deciding what to have for supper. We convinced ourselves that maybe my parents would surprise us, that seeing me happy would be more important than following their fear-based rules. But we planned for the worst-case situation. The most difficult thing was lying to my parents every day leading up to the wedding. They'd call to check in and inquire about my classes and studies, and I'd assure them everything was okay while concealing my engagement ring beneath my shirt. My mother would discuss Olivia's recovery and how pleased she was that our family was finally recovering. I was completely oblivious that I was going to disrupt their calm. I was continuously guilty because I knew what I was doing would hurt them, even though I believed it was right. Olivia kept telling me that my guilt will vanish once I was married and happy. Our parents' anxieties did not have complete influence over my life. She had gone through hell with Luke and survived, and she felt my healthy connection with Noah deserved to be out in the open rather than hidden away. She assisted me in practicing. What I would say when I ultimately informed them, going through many scenarios and reactions until I was prepared for every potential reply. Luke was released from parole 4 weeks before the wedding. Olivia received a notification from the victim services coordinator and quickly contacted me, her voice trembling so terribly that I couldn't understand her. He had only spent 4 years of his 10-year sentence due to jail overcrowding and good behavior, and now he was out with an ankle monitor and a restraining order, which Olivia dismissed as just paperwork. My parents went into full protective mode again, installing new locks and security cameras, and effectively placing Olivia under house arrest for her own safety. The restraining order indicated Luke couldn't get within 500 feet of her, but they didn't believe it. They had previously trusted the judicial system, and it had failed her. This change clearly made my situation more problematic because my parents were now extremely concerned about anything that may harm their girls. I considered postponing the wedding, but Olivia said no. She claimed Luke's exit was precisely why I needed to go through with it. To demonstrate that his acts did not provide him permanent power over our entire family. She explained that my connection with Noah had nothing to do with her experience with Luke, and that confusing the two was precisely the problem with our parents' blanket prohibition on dating. Not all men were Luke. Not all relationships ended violently. I deserved my own tale, independent from hers. She vowed she'd be in the courthouse on January 16th, even if our parents had her on lockdown, and that she'd find a way to be there for me as I had been for her after the operation. The night before the wedding, I could not sleep at all. I slept in my dorm room, looking at the ceiling as Maya slept blissfully in the next bed, and I ran over every potential scenario in my head. Best case scenario, my parents were wounded, but later reconciled. Worst case scenario, they cut me off totally, and I didn't see them again for years. The morning of January 16th dawned chilly and sunny, and I awoke at 6, despite the fact that the ceremony wasn't until 11. Maya forced me eat breakfast despite the fact that my stomach was in knots, and she helped me prepare as if we were going to combat. I put on the cream dress, basic makeup, and the ring that had been hidden beneath my shirt for 7 months. Maya snapped pictures of me in our dormitory room. When my future children inquire about my wedding day, I plan to show them these photos. Noah texted at 9:30, saying he was already at the courthouse with Ben and that the officiant will be ready anytime we arrived. I informed Maya it was time to leave, and we strolled out into the chilly January air toward downtown. My phone rang while we were 3 streets away, and I almost dropped it when I realized it was my mother calling. My hands were trembling so terribly that I couldn't answer, so Maya grabbed my arm to support me. My mother's voice was tense with barely contained worry. She questioned where I was since she had phoned my dorm room and I had not answered. I stated I was grabbing coffee with Maya before my afternoon class, which was a lie because it was only 10 a.m., and I didn't have class on Thursdays. She told me she wanted me to come home straight now because something had happened to Olivia. My heart stopped and I inquired whether Olivia was all right, if Luke had broken the restraining order, and if she was wounded. Olivia was physically okay, according to my mother, but she left the house this morning without informing anybody of her whereabouts. And, considering Mason's release on parole, they were scared something had happened to her. They'd been phoning for 3 hours and she hadn't answered the phone. I felt sick because I knew where Olivia was. She was already in the courthouse, waiting for me. And now our parents were losing their wits because they thought Mason had stolen her. I informed my mother that I'd try contacting Olivia as well and would let her know if I got through, then disconnected up before she could ask any further questions. Maya glanced at me and asked what we were doing, and I told her we were still going to the courts because Olivia was clearly determined to be there, even if it meant our parents panicked. I contacted Olivia to check if she'd noticed Mom's calls, and she instantly replied that she had, but she'd quiet her phone since today was about me, and she wasn't going to miss it. She said she'd text her mother after the ceremony to say she was at a friend's house and had lost track of time. I felt terrible that my wedding was causing this mess, but we were now 4 blocks from the courthouse, Noah was waiting, and going back now seemed impossible. Maya told me we could still postpone if I wanted, but I shook my head and continued going. The courthouse was an antique structure with marble flooring and towering ceilings that made every sound reverberate. Noah was standing at the entryway wearing a black outfit that I had never seen before. And when he saw me, his entire face brightened up, making all of the complications worthwhile. Ben was there with a camera, ready to capture everything. Olivia arrived from around a corner, wearing a blue dress and a huge smile, despite the turmoil she had caused at home. She grabbed me tightly and murmured how proud she was of me for going through with this. The officiant was a pleasant-looking woman in her 50s who led us to a little room on the 3rd floor where weddings took place. The entire area felt strange. This little chamber with fluorescent lighting was where individuals made lifelong vows between lunch breaks and parking ticket payments. The officiant asked whether we were ready, and Noah took my hand. We were suddenly uttering vows scribbled on notebook paper at 2 a.m. Noah pledged to support my aspirations, even if they involved years of medical school stress and restless residency shifts. He vowed to be patient with my problematic family and never force me to pick between him and them if it could be avoided. I swore to entirely trust him and never let my parents' concerns make me doubt what we'd accomplished together. I committed to talk rather than hide when things became tough, since we were done keeping secrets after today. Noah kissed me after the officiant proclaimed us married, as Olivia, Maya and Ben celebrated quietly and respectfully in the courthouse. Ben photographed us signing the marriage certificate, and it became official and irreversible. I married at 22 to someone my parents had no idea I was dating. And in a few hours, I'd have to inform them and face what happened next. We drove to a small Italian restaurant nearby for a celebratory lunch. We were 5 people in a corner booth eating spaghetti and toasting with water glasses because none of us were old enough to legally order alcohol. Olivia's phone was constantly vibrating with calls from our parents. Finally, she excused herself, calling Mom back and telling her rehearsed story about being at a friend's house working on a project. I could hear her voice from across the diner, contrite yet strong. When she returned, she stated her mother was upset but pleased that she was safe. She agreed to be home in an hour, so our wedding meal had a time constraint. We ate fast and shot more photographs outside the restaurant, hoping to capture the bizarre, fantastic, and terrible day. Noah pulled me tight and asked if I was all right, and I honestly didn't know. I was happy, married, and terrified about what would happen if I informed my parents. Olivia drew me aside before we went and told me I didn't have to tell them today if I wasn't prepared. She suggested that I wait a week or a month until Mason's parole issue calmed down. But I shook my head, saying that keeping this a secret for another day was difficult now that it was true. I wanted to be able to call Noah or my spouse rather than my study companion. I wanted to wear my ring where everyone could see it. I was done hiding, no matter how serious the repercussions were. Olivia hugged me and promised to be there when I informed them she was going to attempt to intervene and explain why this was different from her situation with Luke. She'd let them realize that Noah had been extensively vetted by her for 3 years. That she had carefully monitored our relationship for any warning signs and discovered none. I thanked her and watched her walk to the bus stop, the sister who had been through hell and was still striving for my happiness. Maya returned to university, while Noah and I proceeded to his apartment, where we sat on the couch in startled quiet, holding hands and marveling at our matching rings. We were lawfully married. The magnitude of everything hit me all at once, and I burst into tears, not because of grief, but because of how overpowering everything was. Noah drew me close and assured me that no matter how my parents responded, we'd sort it out together, just like we had with everything else. I wanted to trust him, but I was also aware that my parents' financial assistance extended beyond tuition. It provided accommodation during summer vacations, health insurance, and a safety net in case something went wrong. Losing it seemed terrible, especially with medical school applications due next year. I asked Noah whether he ever regretted picking someone with such serious familial baggage, and he answered no, that my family's pain did not define our relationship, and that he knew what he was getting into. That evening, I resolved to inform my parents as swiftly as possible, like pulling off a bandage. I contacted my mother around 6 and asked if I might come over to discuss something urgent. She instantly inquired if I was pregnant or in danger, and I answered no, just something I needed to talk about in person. She said my father would be home by 7 and I should come for dinner. I met Noah in his car and drove to my parents' house in quiet. Both of us are ready for the worst. I instructed him to stay in the car while I imparted the news, but he insisted on joining me. He said that now that we were married, we had to face things together rather than me sheltering him from the repercussions. We pulled up to my childhood house and stood in the driveway for 7 minutes, building confidence before stepping through the front door. My mother opened the door before I could knock, and her expression brightened up when she saw me, before dropping when she spotted Noah behind me. She inquired who he was, and I told her he was a study companion from school, who had brought me here since my car was experiencing problems. Another lie, but this one is my last, since everything will be real in approximately 10 minutes. We went inside and my father was arranging the table, when he looked up and made the same double take as Noah. My parents had never met him despite our 3-year relationship, since our cover story only worked if they never saw us together. Olivia was already sitting at the counter, and she gave me a positive nod. My mother asked whether Noah wanted to remain for supper, and I answered that he should since I needed to tell them something and he was involved. We all sat down at the dining room table. eating lasagna my mother had cooked, and the normalcy of the situation felt strange considering what I was going to say. My father inquired how school was doing, and I answered good before taking a big breath and telling them I wanted to confess something I had been hiding. My mother's face stiffened immediately, and she looked at Olivia as if she believed this was about Mason. I assured them that it had nothing to do with Olivia, Mason, or anything harmful, but they were not pleased. I took the chain from beneath my shirt and showed them the ring I had been hiding for 7 months. And both of my parents glanced at it in confusion. I said that Noah and I had been dating for 3 years, had met before they enforced the no dating rule, and had continued to see each other in secret because I couldn't give up either him or their assistance for medical school. The hush that followed was oppressive. My father inquired whether I was joking, and I told him no, I was fully serious. My mother looked at Noah as if he were a stranger who had broken into her home, which he probably was. She questioned how I could be so selfish and careless given all they'd been through with Olivia. And I felt my cheeks get heated with humiliation and wrath. I explained that while I understood their worry, Noah was not Mason, and that lumping all males together because of one bad individual was unjust and unhealthy. Olivia came forward, stating that she had been aware of the connection for 3 years and had been keeping an eye out for any warning signals. Noah had treated me with nothing but respect and care the whole time. My father sprang up from the table so quickly that his chair nearly tipped over. He stated I had violated their trust and disobeyed the one rule they'd set up to keep me safe, and there would be repercussions. I told them I was aware of the implications, but they needed to grasp something first. I got out my phone and showed them images from the last 3 years. Noah and I studied at coffee cafes. He assisted me in moving into my dorm room. We volunteered together at the downtown free clinic. Olivia had covertly stolen a few of them. I am documenting a connection that my parents had no idea existed. I showed them texts from Noah, who checked in on me during midterms, bringing me food while I was too anxious to eat, staying up late to help me prepare for the MCAT. I showed them the chart he created to calculate how we would live if they cut me off financially. My mother was sobbing now, and I couldn't tell if it was because she was angry or for another reason. Then I said something that would alter everything. I told them Noah and I were married at the courthouse this morning. Olivia had been there as our witness, and I understood if they never wanted to talk to me again, but I was not going to apologize for pursuing happiness. The predicted explosion did not occur promptly. Instead, my father sat back down and rested his head on his hand. My mother gazed at the table for at least 4 minutes without saying anything. Olivia reached over and gripped my hand beneath the table. Finally, my father glanced up and asked Noah directly whether he knew what he had signed up for. Marrying into such a dysfunctional and difficult family. Noah caught his gaze and responded, yes. He fully realized that he had witnessed me supporting Olivia's rehabilitation and dealing with the trauma following. He also acknowledged how much I loved my family, despite the challenging circumstances. He stated he did not want to take me away from them. He wants to contribute to our collective healing. My mother inquired why we couldn't have waited 4 more years as they had requested. And I said that 4 years was arbitrary and based on fear rather than a genuine assessment of Noah's character. Olivia informed them about her brain tumor and the commitment she made me to not waste my life waiting for perfect conditions that could never materialize. She went on. Watching Luke nearly destroy her had taught her that life was too short and too unpredictable to postpone happiness. And she'd encouraged me to marry Noah now instead of hiding for 4 more years. My mother began crying harder, and I realized she was no longer angry, but rather overwhelmed, scared, and grieving the loss of control over a situation she had attempted to prevent. My father asked what we expected from them now, if we thought they'd just accept it and continue paying for medical school as if nothing had changed. I said, honestly, I didn't know what to expect, but I hoped they could at least try to get to know Noah before deciding he was dangerous just because he existed. We sat there for another hour talking through everything, and the conversation gradually shifted from accusations to questions. My parents asked Noah about his job, family, and future plans. They asked how we'd managed to hide a relationship for 3 years, and I explained the study partner cover and Maya's constant alibis. They asked if Noah had ever pressured me or shown signs of controlling behavior, and Olivia and I both said no. That in fact, I'd been the one pushing to move faster while Noah wanted to wait and do things right. My mother asked to see the wedding photos, which Ben had already sent to my phone. When she saw pictures of me in my cream dress signing the marriage certificate, she burst into tears. She said I looked happy, which was both wonderful and heartbreaking for her. By the time we left that night, nothing had been resolved, but we were still talking. My father claimed he wasn't ready to give his approval, but he wouldn't cut me off totally, saying we'd settle out the financial issues later. My mother hugged me goodbye and murmured that she was trying to understand, and I muttered back that I realized this was difficult and apologized for the secrecy. Noah shook both of their hands and promised to take care of me, which felt strangely traditional given the circumstances. We drove back to his apartment in silence, both of us emotionally exhausted from the confrontation. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief that the secret had finally been revealed. My parents agreed to meet with Noah and me once a week for dinner, gradually getting to know him and learning to trust him. Olivia became our biggest advocate, constantly pointing out the differences between Noah's respectful behavior and Luke's controlling manipulation. I felt guilty for telling the truth because it had hurt my parents so much. The following few months were complicated and messy. My mom began therapy to process her trauma from Olivia's relationship, and she admitted one night that she'd been trying to prevent the wrong thing. She couldn't prevent me from being hurt, only from living. My father took a little longer to come around, but I'd catch him laughing at Noah's jokes or asking for his advice on tech problems at work. 7 months after the courthouse ceremony, we had a small reception in my parents' backyard with extended family who had no idea I was dating anyone. My mother cried the entire time, but they were happy tears. That fall, I applied to medical school, and Noah sat with me through each essay and interview prep session. I was accepted to 3 programs, and we chose the one that was closest to both of our families, because maintaining those relationships was important to both of us. My parents helped with tuition, as promised, and my father admitted he was impressed with Noah's seriousness about supporting my career. Olivia began dating again for the first time since Luke, someone kind and patient who understood her trauma and never pushed her limits. Despite my parents' rules, I don't regret getting married at the age of 24. She told me that watching my relationship with Noah gave her hope that healthy love existed, and that not everyone would hurt her the way Luke had. Luke violated his parole 9 months after his release and returned to prison for another 5 years, giving us all some breathing room. My parents' blanket ban on dating had not actually kept me safe, but it had taught me to hide and lie, which is arguably more dangerous than being open about relationships where warning signs could be detected early on. It was more difficult than waiting, and it caused pain and conflict that could have been avoided, but it also forced necessary conversations about fear, control, and healing that our family needed to have. Olivia says my rebellion gave her permission to start living again instead of letting Luke's abuse define her forever. She's now planning her own wedding to her kind, patient boyfriend, and my parents are genuinely happy for her instead of terrified. Noah surprised me with a proper honeymoon the week of our first anniversary, after we'd skipped it the first time. We went to this small beach town where we could finally be publicly married without worrying about who might see us. We walked on the beach wearing our rings in full view, and the freedom of it felt incredible. After years of hiding, my parents sent us a card congratulating us on our 1-year anniversary, which felt like final acceptance after all the struggle. My mom had written inside that she was proud of me for fighting for my happiness, even when it scared her, and that she was grateful I'd found someone who treated me with the respect I deserved. My father had added that Noah had proven himself to be exactly the kind of partner they'd hoped I'd find someday, just sooner than they'd expected. It's surreal to tell this story now because I remember how terrified I was the morning of the wedding. How certain I was that my parents would never forgive me. The reality turned out to be more complicated than I'd imagined, but also more hopeful. They didn't forgive me right away, but they also didn't abandon me. They struggled, asked questions, and gradually learned to trust again. Olivia's recovery played a huge role because watching her heal while Luke rotted in prison demonstrated that trauma does not have to define you forever. My parents had been so focused on preventing future pain that they had forgotten that people need permission to pursue joy. Getting married at 24 was not foolish or selfish, as my father first argued. It was simply a decision to begin my life rather than wait for someone else's schedule to enable it.